Welcome to Goat Island. I'm your host, the Big Ka Huzzi, and this is your weekly sports. And when it comes to team sports and our GOAT clubs, nations, teams, guess what? As always, back the boys. And in the Premier League, our boys, the Reds LFC, have gone 3 for 3 in the first matches of the season. And who would have known? Who? Me. I knew. I called it a thank you. Liverpool not only beat Newcastle in their backyard, but left with their star striker, Isak. When it came to LFC and the Gunners, guess what? The Reds are top 2 and they're not 2. And Liverpool beat Arsenal 1-0 to remind them that they'll always be the best in second place. Next up this coming weekend, the boys take on Burnley. Who gives a shit? LFC still the champs, damn it. And now for rugby. We've been locked in on the Rugby Championship, in which both our rugby nations of the All Blacks and the Springboks have been going head to head. And now this past Saturday was the first time the Springboks and All Blacks came face to face in a year. This time from Eden Park, New Zealand, a strong contrast from last year's final meeting of the two rugby titans in the greatest city on earth, Cape Town. We'll cover the results for this when both back-to-back matches are said and done. And this week, our two nations run it back. For the second week in a row, it will be the All Blacks versus the Springboks, with South Africa taking on New Zealand again this Saturday, the 13th of September, 9:05 a.m. SAST, live from Wellington, New Zealand. Which one of our teams will come out on top? Will this end with both nations holding a W? Or will this be a clean sweep for the biggest rivalry in all of rugby history? Either way, we win and rugby wins. Because when you get the best versus the best, that's always a massive W. 3 letters, UFC. Now it's time to get the most violent of sports on focus right in the center of the octagon. So fighters, ready. And sometimes the matchmakers don't get it right, but we're trying to make the biggest, baddest, and best fights possible. So what's Hunter's number? For September, it's all about Girls Want Girls, as we put together the most box office matchups in the female side of the UFC. And this week, it's about the number 1 contenders fights. And we're giving you 2 of the most exciting ones right now to make. So, option number 1 for number 1 title contender fight is Tatiana Suarez, 2nd ranked strawweight, versus Alexa Grasso, 3rd ranked flyweight, for number 1 contender for the women's strawweight title. Look, this is a banger and stylistic clash of jiu-jitsu versus wrestling, a grappling war. And funnily enough, even though Suarez is ranked higher in her division in the pound for pound rankings, she's ranked 11th, whereas Grasso is ranked 7th and is the former champ. This fight sees Alexa moving down in weight, plus gives Suarez another path back to the title she never won. This is a technically amazing fight and a show for the girls to display exactly how great they are. And the second option for number 1 title contender fight on the women's side of the UFC, we got Tracy Cortez, ranked number 8th in the flyweight division, versus Julian Pena, ranked number 1 in the bantamweight division. For the number 1 contenders match of the women's flyweight title, this one is, Tracy, she's the baddie of the women's MMA, and she might be lower in her division's ranking and not even place in the pound for pound rankings, but only 2 L's? Nah. Plus, Peña's last fight was losing the belt to the current champ at bantamweight. You move her down and it's a completely different ball game. This one gets the eyes for the obvious looks, plus it's just exciting. And the matchup across 2 divisions. Of course, what happens inside that octagon is absolute and definitive. However, now is when we go back for all the if, buts, and maybes. And September's topic is Jon Jones's violent, chaotic, and drama-filled run from winning the 205 title back in early 2011 at UFC 128 through multiple incidences and getting stripped of his light heavyweight belt until he regained the championship back for a second time at the end of 2018 at UFC 232, all while remaining undefeated inside of the octagon. This is bloody bones. And to continue this chapter of if, buts, and maybes, we have to ask the question of what if. And this week's what if Jon didn't run away? Back in May of 2015, Jones was scheduled to fight the late great Anthony Rumble Johnson at UFC 187, but a month prior, in April of that year, Bones was involved with a hit and run case where he knocked into a pregnant woman and then quickly left the scene before authorities arrived. And what happened because of this? The UFC immediately stripped Jon of his light heavyweight title and suspended him. And what was the impact? Daniel Cormier replaced Jones at UFC 187 against Anthony Johnson for the then vacant title, and DC won. In other words, if Bones had stuck around at the scene of the incident and didn't run away, which he probably did because of intoxication and fear of authorities finding him guilty of substance abuse resulting in the accident, well, if he did stick around with the authorities there and Jones was sober and not completely at fault and did the right thing, then it wouldn't be a hit and run case. It would just be an unfortunate accident. The UFC wouldn't have stripped him of his title, and DC might have never become the light heavyweight champ and probably never reached double champ status. Cormier still would have gotten a heavyweight title, but everything else? Nah, not happening unless the title was vacant. And yet still, Jon Jones came back, rematched DC, whom he had already defeated, and took his title back from Cormier at UFC 214, got stripped again, but he still just wanted to show DC, hey, as long as I'm fighting, you can only hold that belt while I'm out. If Jon Jones doesn't run away from the accident in 2015, Cormier might never touch the light heavyweight title. History changes right there. The 3 most infamous letters in all of sports and entertainment, the WWE. This is when we get into it. On the island, we don't just shoot first, we shoot often. This is just heat. And over the years, there have been many greats, many top guys, and over talent, but right now we have to ask the only question that matters. Who's the GOAT? And this week is all about end of an era, looking at the end of the women's diva era from then until now, modern women's wrestling. And the best of category, best of top heels. And I'll go pick Becky Lynch right now. Look, Becky came back after being a mom and not only turned heel shortly after WrestleMania 41, before turning, she lost the tag team titles that she just won at the grandest stage of them all, and then started her current run of making the new women's intercontinental title a main event worthy championship. She came back after almost a year off and pulled off the smoothest turn in all of women's WWE history. She made a mid-card title more exciting than the big belts, and the title itself is less than a year old, and she made it seem like the top prize. Plus, she just got involved with her husband, who's also a heel and champion, and could possibly be the one to face the legendary AJ Lee after being gone from the company for a decade. She's the bad guy you hate that you love and that you love to hate, but she's just so fucking good at being bad. So when it comes to the best top heels throughout all of WWE's modern history, WWE women's modern history, and they ask who's the GOAT, it's the man, Big Time Bex, the champion who won't stop talking about her husband, one half of WWE's biggest ever power couple, the one they call him Becky Hogan, the one and only Becky Lynch. Becky came back from being a mom, flipped the script and turned heel and made a mid-card title feel bigger than the big belts. That's GOAT behavior. One question: do you even love bro? And the answer will always be yes. And always yes, for just one reason only: for the gains. Whether science-based or the bro lifting, either way we out here to build bigger and better bodies. And it's time for us to go down to Showdown, because this week it's all about fueling our body. And the feeding tip of the month: just enough of what's enough. And it's in the name, but especially for when you're trying to trim body fat and in a cutting phase, the focus is to lower that body fat percentage to show more of the muscles rather than to add muscle mass itself. And for this purpose, you don't need much. For energy levels and not losing lean muscle mass throughout this period, of course you want to maintain a decent protein intake, but at the same time, in terms of that muscle mass, you're really just maintaining. The focus is the fat loss, which means caloric deficit. So how do you do that? Only eat when you need to, like once a day just for basic function and once a day for post-workout. For energy not to dip too much and for it to be in the caloric window after your session. Past this, there's really no need for you to eat. That serves your goal. A controlled portion of complex carbs will stop you from being fatigued if you have a pre-workout, and your caloric deficit from eating your muscle mass. But honestly, eat just enough of what's enough. Cutting phase isn't about eating more. It's about eating just enough of what's enough. Caloric deficit equals fat loss. And that's how you get shredded. And that's a wrap for this week's sports drop. And you can like and subscribe. If you have any thoughts, drop a comment. And from Goat Island, this is the Big Ka Huzzi. Check you again.